Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in to Toward a Quality of Life, coming to you from AA Video Productions for BNN TV and myself. We're going to review a number of things this evening. I usually try to talk about things that we all need to know, that we urgently need to know, so tonight I'm going to touch heavily upon certain environmental issues, issues of regulations, issues in politics regarding all of this, issues about religion and politics, and counterpointing that to some of the more fundamental and practical needs that we have quite urgently in front of us today. So, to begin, let's talk, unfortunately, about more of the horrors from the great outdoors. At the start, I unfortunately have to mention that on approximately the 21st of this month, and we are making this video in January of the year 2000, and about the 21st of this month, there was a very serious oil spill on a bay in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. It affected the beaches, it affected the mangrove area and swamps, and even as I jotted this down to have to convey this to you, my body slumped, and I felt the sorrow and the pity and the tragedy for animals, pity for humans, that fish and wildlife that need to use the swamp and mangrove area will come there now or were there when it happens and see all oil. If you stop and allow yourself to be the pelican or some other kind of fowl coming to the area that is now oiled, you need a place to nest, you need a place to eat some fish, and there it is, all spoiled and contaminated with oil. This is so sad. Were you to stop and really let your mind ponder this. The company that was responsible for the oil tanker having a spill is called Petrobras, which is a national oil company of Brazil, and they were fined $28 million. There is no money that can repair oil spill damage. And it just so happens on this very day that I'm taping this video for you, which is the 31st of January, I read on the wire that that same company sustains another oil spill near Sao Paulo in Brazil this very day. Also, not too long ago, there was quite a bit over the wire about an oil spill in the Mediterranean on the coast of France. To name only a couple that get reported that are so serious, and the beaches and the wildlife areas and just our own natural birthright to life, wholesome and real as it's supposed to be, getting destroyed day by day, and apparently tankers not having double hulls in place to prevent this oil from seeping out. And generally, regarding regulation, obviously not having the proper kind of regulation that could prevent and curtail the innumerable spills that continue to spoil the deep ocean, the shallow ocean, the coastal waters, the places for life to live, for fish to live, for wildlife to breed and feed and nest and so on. Horrible stuff that can, if we let ourselves, make our spirits feel low and pessimistic, to be sure. Next, of course, in December, right here in the United States, in the state of Louisiana, I see go by on the wire again that the Gulf area off the coast of Louisiana is very polluted, and the shellfish and quote-unquote other sea creatures are dying. Others could be turtles, could be any kind of fish creatures or amphibian creatures that come to that area or live in that area it was just called Other Sea Creatures, and the shellfish are dying because of nitrogen and phosphorus running off the agricultural land into the rivers that feed into the Gulf. And this is because of the nitrogen and phosphates leaching or running off the land that is used for agriculture, going into the rivers that eventually feed into the Gulf, and these nutrients get into the seawater, and then algae bloom, and when the algae bloom, the other organisms that live there, the non-vegetable, the non-plant life, the animal life that lives there doesn't have enough oxygen to survive. And there's also runoff, it said, going into the Gulf from developed land in general, and from soil eroding, and from sewage, also from industrial discharge. Now, there is said to be a federal law that is supposed to take effect by March of 2000. The law was put into effect in the year 1998. Supposedly by March, the Gulf area is supposed to have remedies so that these kinds of conditions cease to exist, which remains to be seen. The fact of the matter is March is just several days away, really, and the report is that shellfish and quote-unquote other sea creatures are dying. Now, I ask you, when you hear these horrible stories like I've just conveyed to you, and they're so numerous if you really pay attention to reports coming in from all over the world all day long, these kinds of news, so to speak, can make you feel so depressed, especially if you can empathize and you can feel what it's like to be a creature needing to live, becoming extinct, becoming sick, becoming cancerous, becoming unable to have a place where the migratory patterns bring one and where one is used to going, and suddenly to not have Mother Earth, just like is going to come home to roost to us and has come to some people in certain areas already. When you realize you don't have Mother Earth to rely upon, that your very lifeline is gone, and something terrible has happened, and it's all spoiled, and it's not by a natural cataclysm, but it's by human hand. This is very depressing to the human spirit. How are people supposed to feel? That's why people, one of the kinds of things that people hear on the news that make so many people turn off the news and not want to listen to it. They have enough, so many stressing and depressing things to contend with all day. They can't handle anymore. And the kind of things that I unfortunately have to bring to you, because they are so urgent to pay attention to and have on our minds and be aware of, are very, very dissipating and sinking to the human spirit. Fundamentally, far more severely profound kind of inner problems to human beings than anything more mundane of the typical kind of things we might experience on a daily basis in our regular work life and other routines. And also, how are our children supposed to feel when what they're inheriting, besides adults that bring them into the world not having enough time for them and them trying to find a way to survive and get by, whether they're affluent or economically not so advantaged, whatever the case may be, but having to sort of fend for themselves to a great degree, especially psychologically, and find their way through this world, and on top of it, hearing and seeing and growing up, which we can't appreciate because it's a whole different aura and atmosphere right now for new generations, not only with technology but with these environmental concerns. Growing up and having to be in an atmosphere, no pun intended, that says things are going awry, fish are dying, wildlife is extinguishing, there's roadkill all over the road, animals are in zoos and animals are in laboratories, and the cute cuddly things that you would love to love and the stuffed animals that represent them aren't the reality of what's going on in their natural life. and that children need to be taught environmental sciences because this is the curricula of the real world that we live in. They have to see cartoons that talk about an environment that needs to be fixed. And so here they come into the world and they're left with a legacy of a world dump that has to be cleaned up, air that they say is not good enough for children to be breathing, and asthma increasing, especially in children, at great rates. And there it is, dumped in their lap. And that the garbage and the stuff we throw away is so voluminous there aren't landfills enough to contain it, and that radioactive waste has no place to be put safely, and that it virtually never goes away and eventually erodes whatever it's contained in and leaches, and not leaches, but emanates its way into whatever barriers it's up against, etc., etc., and that the ozone layer is depleting, etc. What things for children to be inheriting for their health and happiness that McDonald's and Chuck E. Cheese's and whatever else we try to, Pokemons we try to give our children, certainly isn't going to make up for the more fundamental sore spot that they are inheriting. And certainly we know they are also inheriting a tendency to be quite sore and to do things that express this soreness in what to us seems highly ununderstandable ways to boot, on top of all these other problems that they have to face, or even as an outcome of this highly, highly problematic environment that we bring them into. We recently had dolphins washed ashore in the Keys, a team of them. Half of them or so were sick and dying, and the other half would not leave their side and came ashore with them. And you know, the ironic thing that has to be pointed out, or the rather unappealing and somewhat cynical outcome of this kind of situation that happens over and over again is to have people who are professionals in the field or experts in the field say that they will have to study why these dolphins are dying. They will have to examine the situation. There are no time for studies, and furthermore there are human brains, especially scientific brains, and at least we could grossly conclude, generally speaking, or make an assumption, hypothetically, that one great area to be investigating or thinking must be the cause is the very water these dolphins are trying to swim in, the very environment they are trying to be part of. Now, would that be too much of a statement to make that we must look to this ocean that must be breeding disease and breeding undue temperature changes, bacteria, radioactive spills, any number of things, garbage thrown over cruise ship sides of the ship into the ocean, and all kinds of things clandestinely thrown into the ocean water? Should we not look to what, by the human brain, could be the most obvious place, the very water the animals have to live in, have to swim in, have to be alive in? Let's not be too smart about this now. Then, not too long ago, to bring the environment and the urgent need, the urgent, dire need for us to be aware of this, to be thinking about it, not necessarily to be in organizations, but to have these kinds of things on our minds as much as any other kinds of things may be on our minds. For example, Super Bowl kinds of ideas, or not something that you can store and reuse. They're trying to make these seeds non-reproducing kind of seeds, so you'd have to buy new ones all the time. They own the patents, and they see great profits in store. So it's very interesting what kind of battles are looming, because they will not yield, again, no pun intended, they are not going to be yielding lightly to not being able to market this whole new area, and companies always want whole new areas or whole new markets for never-ending growth. They're not going to yield lightly to letting go of what they see as a potential gold mine. In this and in genetic engineering of biological parts and processes of animals and human beings as well. Now, again, to show the need for regulation, the need for us to be aware and thinking, because it's all happening. How much are you going to let it continue to happen? How much are you going to be the monkey that doesn't even understand that the people who call environmentalists alarmists and crazy and can't sit down and just open their eyes and take the wax out of their ears and see that 1 + 1 is 2, and that carbon monoxide every day in every way adds up and you continue to breathe it. And salt on roads, for example, like we have right now after our recent snowstorm here in Boston, and I'm sure in other places when it snows as well, salt on roads gets put there and is a very harsh and skin and eye irritant to the human and other kinds of organismic bodies, gets put there in pounds and pounds and pounds, also probably corrodes the asphalt and causes the road to have to be repaired more, certainly does damage to vehicles, which is side things, which is not even of fundamental importance here, but is something that washes into our water system. Why do we dump all this salt onto the roads? Again, for example, the unfortunate circumstances that I can cite to you, I say again, are unfortunately too numerous. I wish I didn't have to keep citing them, but there's no place you can breathe or turn or look or think or try to relax about without realizing Mother Nature, as Neil Young has put it, is on the run. And it's very harrowing and very depressing indeed. We used to use good old-fashioned dirt when we had ice on the roads and snow, impassable or unsafe roads. Just dirt is so effective to stop, and certainly non-toxic, so good to just put on the roads and keep traffic safe and keep pedestrians safe. Why do we use these, and why do we allow the manufacturing of these things, the things we have to know, and the depth and intricacy to which we have to be aware runs through our entire group, our entire wholeness as an interconnected whole of people in operation, in work, in survival, in economics. One thing leads to another, and everything is attached to everything else, and we have to look what the chain links are between all of this, and we have to address how we have to curtail and take other pathways, other ways of thinking, other value systems, other beliefs, other ideas, other wishes, other wants for the quality of and kind of life we want to lead. We have to realize this as a whole, and the complex whole that's interrelated and interconnected. And certainly as part of this, we want to curtail manufacturing of compounds like the salt on the roads, like genetically engineered products, like dioxins, like any of the other things that I've mentioned today or in the past. Like what comes to mind, Drano in every drain. We don't need these things. They're doing us harm. They shouldn't be going into our water. These are just common sense. We don't need studies about it. We need human brains that are thinking and paying attention, not in any kind of dreary down way, but just were we to have our regular presence of mind about us, we'd have more sense about what we're doing and what's going to make us happier. In the short run, it may look more depressing to pay attention, but the real depression is to let all these things mount, have children that have to survive amongst this, have to worry for their health, have them sick in our hospitals in ways that children should never be ravaged, have the curious mind question and put two and two together. In the short run, it may look depressing, but in the longer run, us knowing all this, and we all know it together, not because we make ourselves know it this way, but we just have our brains ticking better, this in and of itself is a whole new future for us. That alone, without us even having to get organized, if we just used common sense. Wow, we don't need the pesticides to the degree. In fact, we have a really improper negative attitude to a great extent against insects, spiders and ladybugs and insects, many of which are so helpful to us and so necessary in the scheme of things. And I don't like to get too technical about it. I like to stay more natural about it, but we have wrong attitudes towards plants and insect life, much of which is good and much of which would not be the problem that it is were we ourselves as humans not way out of balance, so that other parts of life become out of balance in conjunction with what we're doing. We have waxes and kinds of cleansers being used in institutions that I am in sometimes, and other people operate in, waxes and cleansers that are so bad for the lungs and so bad for other organ parts, and their strength is way too severe to be being used on a daily basis as it is, and people are living under those circumstances, breathing that, getting headaches, taking pills as antidotes to their headaches, when it's these chemicals in their environments that don't need to be there. Other ways we can be as clean and as antiseptic without going to these extremes and ruining our health in the process. Go down an aisle of the grocery store, 1 or 2 or 3 aisles in a store today, and you'll see so many chemicals that really don't smell right, don't affect our body the way they're supposed to. They're actually harsh or detrimental to our skin or to our breathing, and you can smell in the aisles all the chemical mess right in the grocery stores. And these kinds of products, cleansers and so on, are proliferating rather than being kept very simple and very wholesome and of natural ingredients that can't possibly harm us, used in proper proportion. So we have to, as a workable whole, regulatorily be able to surveil and understand and work with this fabric of human life that is interconnected, and have ways of overseeing and reaching goals of greater human happiness, greater health, greater environmental health, greater natural life thriving, greater harmony, greater peace of mind through natural environments, etc., etc. We have to be, that's why I come to you and talk about this, just to kind of get these kinds of ideas under the skin, hopefully. And so many people already have them, believe them, and love them. It's not to convince you, it's just to say, hey, check it out for yourself, open your eyes, open your ears, use your mind, and you will see. You will see, without the shield of science, without the veil, without the veneer of industry, you will see things more plainly and certainly intelligently when you use your mind. And you're apt to find out, if you really start thinking about these things and putting 1 and 1 equals 2 together, the way logic would dictate, that many of the aerosols and soaps and preservatives and hormones and genetically engineered substances and irradiated products, on and on and on. I won't keep, excuse me, going into the list, that many of these things are directly responsible for your kidney ailments, your cancers, your liver ailments, for mental retardation, for problems with the immune system. If we were clear thinking, we would know the linkage, the more logical linkage between real, tangible, observable effects and variables directly onto our physical and mental health. To say the least of the big bugaboo of all these big bugaboos, nuclear power, including nuclear power operating in so-called correct ways. You would see that to burn the forest and chop trees is not in your own interest if you really looked into it and allowed yourself to see that it's very deleterious to your life, to our life, to the whole life, to our children's lives. You know, a cute little, actually a not cute little anecdote of about a town that I frequently see in Massachusetts and that I've visited over the years many times. Suddenly, because it's such a rural town, people have gone to it in droves and bought lots to build homes there, and they went there because it is so rural, it had so many trees, and most of the people, when they built their homes, chopped down every single tree on their land of this place in the town that they came to because it had so many trees and was so rural. So these are kinds of curiosities and environmental behaviors about ourselves that we can check into and think about more. Regarding the matter of regulation that I've alluded to a few times in the course of this talk with you, the battle lines are drawn, and there is a very big battle going on, even if you're not in the thick of it, as some people are, preconditioning you, predetermining your thinking, pre-training how your thinking should go, commercializing you, maybe not on purpose per se, but when one has economic anticipations about the products that one is making, and it just maybe has a short-sighted view of the money that can be made and the hard knocks of getting products out and delivering them to market and marketing them the most effective way possible to get the maximum number of people purchasing at the maximum dollar amount and growing the companies more and getting greater stock dividends and stock prices over time. One can get caught up in that advertently or inadvertently and truly believe it. Believe that one is, after all, implicitly operating in a country of capitalism and free enterprise, though we won't even get into the subject of how enterprise isn't really free and how markets are not really free, and we won't get into questions of just how much growth should there be under the control of how many people, and how are the resources distributed, and what effect that's having on the world as a whole, and where do people altogether stand in the scheme of things, like I said, as a workable whole. So you may not even be aware, but there certainly is a lot going on to condition you to think along the lines of the manufacturing of the kind of products I've been talking about, and of pursuing and making even bigger the kinds of processes that are having such harmful and deleterious effects on everybody's health and welfare. And it can be innocent enough that people would go into these kinds of mindsets and philosophical styles of living their lives, and yet what we're talking about here regarding regulation has nothing to do with standing in the way of commercial progress or disallowing so-called commercial speech, which is becoming so entrenched that it can't even be challenged as to its validity or necessity, for that matter, or proper fit into the scheme of things. But we're talking about the regulation of these matters as a matter of despoiling life, despoiling health, despoiling the environment, despoiling one's right to breathe real air, or not just a right. Let's not even phrase it in those terms. You need sunshine, you need clean air, you need clean water, you need non-pesticided food, you need non-genetically engineered food, you need wholesome food, you don't need hormones in your milk, you don't need antibiotics in your meat. You need things that are decent and clean and pure to breathe and eat, and you need lifestyles that are not based so much on shallow commercial drives for entities and end results that lead you to a vacuum, that lead you very lonely, surfing the internet, desperately trying to find somebody to talk to, because we can't even call it relate to, in some kind of pathetic, lonely way. To take the more outside cases, but this is where the world is going, and we're talking about the very way we're going to live and the meaning of it, and how life has to be naturally in order for it to be good. So, and it's going to be told to you in the short-sighted way that a lot of what myself and other people who are environmentally concerned are talking about is foolish, is crazy, is extreme, is radical. But I don't think caring about why there is so much cancer, up to 1 out of 2 people as we enter the new millennium will be sustaining cancer, or why there is so much stress, or why there is so much heart disease, or why there is so many malformations and immune problems, and any number of kinds of problems happening to the children who are born these days, or the asthma that is happening in an increasing way, etc., etc. And the vested interests, of which you might be a small part or a large part, be that as it may, are even waging campaigns right now to not only give you advertisements and commercials about what they want you to be doing in regards to what they're selling, they're also waging campaigns to just get your mind to be of a certain mindset and wavelength, on a certain wavelength about the general areas that they want to continue to be able to proliferate in, even though this proliferation is causing so many people to rightfully question. So they're getting in advance of that. They're telling you, for example, in non-company specific commercials, how good plastic is. Plastic is a wonderful thing. They're getting you to think that without you realizing it, or trying to get you to think that. They're telling you that they are the farmers to the world, the providers of food to the world, as they manage and control all the food stuff and all the land to grow the food stuff, both in this country and in other countries. And this is not to malign them, but they're way ahead of the battle in seeing what's coming down the pike as people do become more aware and carry within them the common sense and just ordinary brain usage kind of knowledge or weariness you know, something is dreadfully wrong and seeping and eroding away at the quality of the fabric of our very lives. So when we talk regulations and we talk workable wholes and how one thing leads to another and how all of us must take our concessions in mutual agreement with each other, not just one sector of the economy or another. We're talking about things that must be done for our very wholesome survival, to live life the way it's supposed to be lived, and to cease and prevent and arrest all the wrongdoing, which I'm not saying is done with malintent, certainly done without foresight, but the wrongdoing that is affecting all of us and just is no way for people or life or anyone in general to be going. And that's what we're facing when we have to talk about these matters of regulation. I grant you that regulating and the idea of us having to be purveyors of each other and sensible to these matters around us does bring on a lot of questions that are very sticky, of too burdensome a regulation, or right now things that affect one sector and not another. There's a lot of sticky issues with that. But let's try to get more alert and aware, each of us individually. And if we're all walking individually more alert and aware to begin with, we're going to be heading all this off at the pass and having a more workable mutual group and lifestyle together than we have now. And finally, too, regarding regulation, at least for our talk today, I would like to just put in that being able to regulate this way, whichever way we come to together with more knowledge and awareness, is not a matter of having more technology or some kind of technology be our salvation, as in recycling, or as in having lower fuel cars, or having new kinds of medical apparatus to help us with various medical problems. It's not about more technology, more ways of growing capitalist companies to come up with commercially to have us spend money, give us a new device, or somehow just turn the corner and take a new tack on the same old, but leave the same old fundamental problems untouched, unsurmounted. No, it's about doing away with, going towards ceasing and desisting from all those things that are spoiling life, ruining life, period, not minimizing them or tinkering with them a bit, like in recycling, not in recycling plastic and trying to get at the problem that way, for example, but more, for example, going back to glass and starting to get rid of plastic altogether, as one example. And we're running out of time here, so I can't dwell on this aspect of it either, but I did want to bring that in before we end. I also was unable in this talk to get to the politics of, literally the politics of what's going on and what will go on regarding the environment and every kind of general area that I've brought specifics up about today. So we'll have to leave that for another time. Suffice it to say, what comes to my mind is one of the candidates, Al Gore, who has written a book about environment some time ago and has been very ridiculed for it, has been out there on environment during the campaign, but nowhere near as outspoken as he probably really does feel in his heart of hearts, because in the practical sense, in the short run, that would likely mean a decided diminution in the funds that he could be getting and the power support that he could be getting. And power is money, and money kind of support that he could be getting. So that's just an aside thought. about that when I talk about politics in the mix of this whole urgent circumstance and circumstances that I'm trying to convey to you. But be that as it may, we're going to end here today, and we will pick up on another session again with a continuance of where we can go, where we should go, how politics fit in, etc., on the critical, I can't underscore it enough, bleeding, balding ravages of what is happening to us. And if you don't care about your dearest mother of all, dear Mother Nature, and God's creatures, though I'm not a religious person, I use that metaphorically, God's creatures, the animals, if you just care about your own selfish self-interest and your own family alone and nothing else, think about that they can't live in a sea of toxicity and stress and the kind of egregious, volatile, fearsome, lonely environment that we are creating with our technology and all the other new life factors that are coming into play as we live in the future now. So I hope that at least a little bit of your brain power is stimulated. Many people are already thinking this way and beyond, and if not to take what I say at face value, to at least check out what I am saying and to think about thinking about what I'm saying, for better or for worse, similarly or dissimilarly, but a raising of the so-called consciousness. And I remain diligently applied to a better culture and a more harmonious and natural, free, fun, relaxed, humane, humanitarian, mental, physical, human environment, life environment, animal environment, tree environment for us all. Good night, till I talk again.
Stay tuned.
We are from the planet Earth. It is the planet of our birth. We take care, we take the time.
A 2-song CD at Tower Boston and Newberry Comics Boston and Cambridge. Check it out.
We want it real, we keep it whole. The Mother Earth, it is our goal. No destruction, we will not spoil. Oh yes, we love nutritious soil. We love the life we breathe.
A collection of essays called The Psychology of Human Life, essays on science, human community, the psychodynamic meaning of ego, and others.
We keep it pure, it is for life and life endure.
Web address addresses to write and call for animals, to help animals in all kinds of ways, in the laboratory, in the wild. This one primarily for primates, and this one you see now for legislation in the United States Congress and around the world on behalf of animals in the laboratory and elsewhere. God help the animals. Thanks to AA Video.